Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe von Photoshop Direkt, inzwischen unsere 8. Episode der 2. Staffel. Wir haben heute etwas Besonderes für euch. Wir haben sehr prominente, bekannte, berühmte Gäste eingeladen.
Ja, und zwar Produktmanager von Photoshop aus den Vereinigten Staaten.
Ganz genau. Wir haben den Tom Hogarty und den Bryan Hughes heute als Interviewpartner und Demo-Partner dabei. Da haben wir eine Besonderheit auch. Wir werden gleich unsere Sendung umstellen. Zwar nicht farblich, aber von Deutsch auf Englisch. Natürlich haben wir uns lange überlegt, synchronisieren wir das Ganze, aber wir finden es eigentlich authentischer, wenn die Kollegen entsprechend uns direkt antworten können. Deshalb werden wir auch die Interviews auf Englisch durchführen.
Genau.
Es wird später eine Episode mit Untertiteln geben. Da gibt uns aber bitte noch ein paar Wochen Zeit, bis wir das Ganze fertig haben.
Ja.
Würde ich sagen, gehen wir rüber. Ganz wichtig, unser Feedback-Blog noch.
Stimmt.
Euer Feedback ist gerne gesehen an photoshopdirekt@adobe.com und ihr findet natürlich alle Informationen zur Sendung unter blogs.adobe.com/photoshopdirekt. Die Adressen sind eingeblendet.
Jo.
Wir gehen rüber, ne?
Würde ich sagen.
Alles
Kommt mal
klar.
mit. Hi, folks.
So, Tom.
I start
Nice
with
to meet
Bryan.
you.
Hi, Bryan. Nice
Hello.
to meet you.
And not crossing. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, Tom.
Okay. So, Tom, Bryan, you're both in the product management team of the Photoshop family. Can you tell us a little bit more about your roles? Maybe you start first, Tom?
Absolutely. So I'm a group product manager on the digital imaging team. I have responsibility for a few products and other activities, primarily Lightroom, the Camera Raw plugin, the Dng file format, Bridge, the file browser that accompanies the Creative Suite. And I also have responsibility for all the social media channels of our digital imaging team, so Facebook, Twitter, Google+, etc.
So you're the guy with the 3 million friends in Facebook.
4. It's closer to 5 million.
5? Oh. So we need to work on that for the Photoshop Direkt channel. So
Yeah, a lot of work to do, Glenn, to
yeah,
get there.
definitely. And Bryan, what's your primary role?
I'm the senior product manager for Photoshop. I also help out the Lightroom team from time to time with outward-facing things. I do a lot of instruction, a lot of the content that you might see in our social media channels, write various articles and whatnot. And being a Photoshop product manager, you wear a lot of different hats, so developer relations and all sorts of different things.
Yeah. And doing interview for a German YouTube channel.
Even things like this. Yes.
That's the core of it, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I mean, the main question is what interests me most. Like, this is the usual question I pose to most of our guests: is when was the first time when you did use Photoshop?
For me, it was Photoshop 3,
right.
way back when there were 15 floppy disks and it came in a huge box
I know,
that
yeah, right.
weighed 40 pounds. So a long time ago, yeah, in college.
Yeah, that would be my next question. For what reason, what occasion? So it was in college, and the reason for starting with Photoshop, or the compelling event for starting with Photoshop, was just get interesting in it, or did you really need to use it?
Yeah, my background was in photography, so I shot freelance motorsports and did all sorts of different types of photography. And I was working at a high-end camera store and helping them build a digital imaging lab. And so I actually had this moment where I went to the Siebold show and I saw Photoshop 4 being released. And I had already been using Photoshop 3. And I saw Kevin Connor, who was our former boss, demonstrating Photoshop 4. And I had this moment where I realized exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of Adobe and I wanted to work on the Photoshop team. And that seemed like a very distant dream at the time because I didn't own my own computer and I didn't live in Silicon Valley and I hadn't finished college. But that was sort of my moment where Photoshop went from being a hobby to an obsession.
All right,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So what was your first time with Photoshop, so to say?
So this is embarrassing. I can't remember the actual specific version number because my use of Photoshop when I first started was much more out of necessity. I was working at a college daily and we were still developing our negatives and printing 5x7 prints to go to press, cropping them with wax pencils and whatnot, writing the ratios on the back. It was a lot of fun. I love the analog aspect of photography, but we were losing time at the end of the cycle. Like every day, we couldn't get in certain photographs because it was just too slow to wait for prints to be made. So I was investing in negative scanners that would at least cut the analog process in half, and we'd scan them and do our post-processing in Photoshop. And so that was my first introduction purely out of necessity, and then it kind of grew from there into a passion as well.
Yeah. So I heard from it you have both a passion for photos. So you're using Photoshop and Photoshop Lightroom also in your personal life, doing photos and retouching things. Are you doing more retouching or composing things, or what are you doing mostly?
For me, I shoot mainly for content for my demonstrations. So for instance, when we added video functionality, I started getting really into video and the GoPro and the 5D Mark II. But I will sort of shoot for whatever is relevant to Photoshop at the time. Working for Adobe forced me to pick up the camera again, and it actually made it more fun because it wasn't a job anymore. I got to just do it as a hobby. So I find that I'm shooting increasingly as the years go by. Like a lot of people, I think most of my time is spent in Lightroom doing global edits, and then when I come over to Photoshop, it's doing things that are a little more wild, manipulations and composites and retouching.
Great.
So that means you just toss around your camera and just bring it out when you find something interesting, or really, do you plan specific shootings to get stuff for your presentations?
Certainly with video, you have to plan a lot more. I've tried doing it where you don't plan and it doesn't work. It would be as if you tried to put this show together and just do it on a whim without planning. It wouldn't work very well. But with photography, I still like to just sort of wander and have fun. Like a lot of us, I take a lot of pictures with my phone, which is convenient because it's with you wherever you go. If I'm taking out the DSLR, I'm usually thinking a bit more about what lens I'm going to want, whether I want a tripod or not, what I might be shooting.
Yeah, I saw a couple of pictures from you about fast cars and so on. Maybe we have a chance to look at them later.
Sure. Don't get me started. This will be a very long show.
Okay, Tom, what about you? Are you doing photography on a daily basis, also in your personal life?
Well, one of the interesting things of working in the industry, and I've worked outside of the photo industry and in the photo industry, is what you shoot kind of changes. So when I'm not working in the photography industry, I do a lot more shooting for passion. I do trips. I go on photo safaris. I do that kind of thing. When I'm working in the industry, it's more of a necessity that I stay up to date on the latest technology. So for me, my passion right now is kind of using the latest generation technology, both capture devices and our software, and testing them on my family.
Yeah,
my family is a never-ending test case for whatever we have latest and greatest. So. But I can still be very passionate about that.
Yeah, I think it's the same for us.
Yeah. I mean, interesting for me is to even hear from you guys that it never gets boring, right?
No, never.
Not at all. Not with the way the technology is moving. Yeah. There's always something really pushing the envelope and challenging you creatively, especially the advent of video and the DSLRs really pushed me beyond what I thought I'd be comfortable with, and I'm super pleased with the results.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's quite usual, but especially at Adobe, I see that the whole product team, the engineers, and also we here in Germany, there's a big love to the products we are presenting and we're using. Yeah. So I think this is quite special. I've never seen another company like this. So SAP is not, there's no SAP product manager in love with
At least we never heard about that.
I'm not sure about it, but
I think the one common ingredient of the 10th floor at Adobe, which is where Tom and I sit, and really a lot of places at Adobe, is passion. Yeah. People on the Photoshop and Lightroom teams are extremely passionate, and one level or another, they use the product in their own lives.
Yeah, great.
And I think you really see that in the product. I guess you see. Because at least this would definitely reflect in the product. If there's no love in the team itself, then I think the product itself would go down the drain, so to say.
Yeah.
At least, right? Cool.
So Photoshop is currently in the 13th generation. First, do we had any plans to skip version number 13 to go to 14 or
just
to have a kind of not to the unlucky number?
I know there are some buildings where there's not a 13th floor, but Adobe in San Jose has a 13th floor, so we have a 13th version.
Okay, great.
Sometimes the code names of the 13th version make fun of the fact that that's superstitious. So I think Illustrator 13 was Jason, which is a horror character.
Yeah. Okay,
Friday
great.
13th.
So for product lines like Photoshop and Photoshop Lightroom, how difficult is the product management? Where are you starting to find out what will be in the next few versions of Photoshop, and how is the development cycle?
This is the fascinating part for me and why I love my job so much. It's not so much a science and you just fill out a formula and you say, well, X number of features in this next release, we'll prioritize them in some kind of mathematical fashion. It really is an art of kind of taking into account the customer feedback that we're hearing about the shipping version, which is something that's been important to Lightroom. But it's also listening to the engineers who are on the cutting edge of technology, who are telling you where imaging is going to be in 5 years. And so you want to kind of go to where that's going to be while also satisfying customer need. And then also looking at what customers are doing, actually watching them use the product so that you can kind of interpret what their challenge is without them having to specifically tell you. Because sometimes not every customer is able to articulate what their roadblock is or what their pain point is. Right. So it's the art of combining all those different factors and coming up with a release that's really compelling and meets our customers' expectations.
Yeah, and I'd say it's very similar for Photoshop. The difference is that Photoshop's been around for over 2 decades. And unlike Lightroom, which is very targeted on its audience and has a very clear sense of what it's for, Photoshop is used for very different things. So you have people in Hollywood, you have doctors and dentists, you have architects, you have all sorts of different people doing things with it. So when it comes to that balance of what you're going to do, there's that much more to consider. So it's a similar approach, but for a lot of different types of people.
How are we gathering this feedback? I know I'm sending you often some mails with the regional feedback, and we have feedback.photoshop.com.
Yeah.
What is else to track? Which functions I use and so on?
So actually the online discussions have been growing in importance, feedback.photoshop.com. Unfortunately, not everyone is comfortable with an online discussion forum, so we'll go out and we'll visit customers and kind of solicit feedback, or we'll bring them into the office so that they can see, we can watch a customer use the product and understand their needs and requirements. So there's really a lot of different avenues for this kind of feedback, and from individual emails from customers to online reports, you name it. We've heard it all, and we have to kind of ingest all of it.
Yeah, and I can tell you on the Photoshop side, for CS6, we did more research than we've ever done before. We spent a lot of time in the field, a lot of the time looking over people's shoulders, and social media has been enormous for us. It really gives us a global conversation with people all over, millions of people, and Tom and I are on top of that every day. So you're able to hear from people that you normally wouldn't talk to.
So great. When I'm opening up Photoshop the first time, I'm asked if I want to provide feedback. How is this being tracked, or what's behind that feature?
So that's called Headlights. It's an opt-in program. We do not look at your image. We just look at where your cursor goes and the different filters and whatnot. It's been incredibly helpful to the Photoshop team. One of the best ways for us to figure out what we want to do is to look at the results from Headlights, and we have millions of different records of what comes back. One of the examples of using that was we wanted to change auto functionality, auto levels, auto curves, brightness, contrast. And when we went out and we did user research, no one admitted to using auto at all. No one. I asked hundreds of people and no one used it. And when we looked at Headlights, we have tens of thousands of records of people using it. And so it told us whether people admit that or not, that's an area of the application that people spend a lot of time. So it's really helping us figuring out which areas people use, which areas people don't use. And you can even infer when people are running into trouble. So if they go into a feature and spend some time there and then cancel, obviously that didn't work well. So it's been great.
Great.
All right, so this is a big recommendation for our customers, right? Use Headlights, or with other words, what's the dialogue in German then the first time when you start Photoshop?
It's Softwareverbesserungsdialog.
So we strongly recommend...
Headlights sounds better.
Yeah, I don't think it ever says Headlights.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point because that's the most direct way to participate in enhancing Photoshop, right?
That's
for
right.
customers. So
we certainly look at it.
Right.
And we're not looking at the pictures, so privacy
No, just about
is
enhancing the product and learning how you use the product. So it's very important to really submit that kind of information by saying yes.
Yeah. So for Lightroom, is there a similar thing, or is it more really talking to the customers?
We do rely on that program of receiving feedback for certain things. Although Lightroom is a slightly younger product, I definitely like to get out and meet with the customers more, watch them use the product. one of the other things we do is we send out surveys to find out about customer satisfaction with certain specific features and what they'd like to see in the next one. So it's a little bit more targeted, more qualitative, less quantitative.
Yeah.
And so we're a little bit more focused on that at this point. So if you get a survey request from Adobe for Lightroom, definitely respond.
Okay.
Great.
Next recommendation.
So for Lightroom 4, what's the hottest thing? Obviously, it's not the slideshow module, but what's your personal favorite?
So for me, it really is the new processing engine. We, again, went back and looked at how we render detail in an image. And we looked at the balance between the highlight detail and the shadow detail. And one of the computer scientists on the team had been familiar with a very technical SIGGRAPH paper. It's imaging group in North America and Europe that publishes all these cutting-edge research papers on the field of imaging. And he had seen this paper and said, well, this could apply to that balancing of highlight detail and shadow detail. So he converted it in under a year to a feature. And so that ability to get all of the dynamic range out of a single image capture in Lightroom 4 is really impressive for me. So much so that I've stopped using some of the dodging and burning and the graduated filters because it's just automatically getting the results I want with just a few sliders.
Yeah, so it's quite number crunching, the new process engine. I heard from one engineer 5 years ago there was no computer to process these new processes and these new algorithms. What's your hardware recommendation for a current Lightroom user to really speed up your process and your workflow?
Well, actually, I try and stay away from too specific hardware recommendations because we've tried to be kind of platform agnostic. Lightroom 1, one of its key attributes is that it could run pretty much on any hardware. Obviously, our imaging science has gotten more complicated. We do require a little bit more horsepower. We're kind of growing with the machines. But in general, your stock laptop will generally do the trick. Always a little bit more RAM, a slightly faster hard drive. And then we also add a lot of headroom in the product so that if you do want to go the extra mile, if you do want to get a solid state disk drive, if you do want to get extra RAM, we're 64-bit capable and we'll utilize all of those hardware advances. But I personally always use a stock laptop that's generally 2 to 3 years old to hold the team's feet to the fire to make sure that they're handling imaging on regular hardware.
Okay, great. So for Photoshop, we added new video capabilities and so on. I see you have the new one, the Retina one, I think, the MacBook Pro. Is it really speeding up your work?
It's a fast machine for sure. I have a very similar thing that I say as Tom. We're not a hardware company. It's great to have new hardware. It's great to run things on new hardware. But we're aware of the fact that people are running our software on machines that are several years old. And it's extremely important that we make sure that we know what that experience is like. The benefits for Photoshop, very similar for Lightroom because we are cross-platform 64-bit. More memory is able to be addressed and highly recommended. Same with hard drives. One of the differences is that Photoshop takes advantage of the GPU quite a bit. So we use that a lot for what we can show on screen, but also for accelerating some of the processes. So having a decent GPU makes a difference. Pretty much the rule for that is if you can run a modern operating system, you probably have a decent GPU. So even the original MacBook Air is able to take full advantage of all of our GPU functionality. So I think in both cases, we're pretty sensitive to legacy users. We all have old machines at home, and we're all using our stuff at home. And so if there are any problems, people are certainly going to complain.
And we're so sensitive that we even pre-announce when we're going to drop old support for older operating systems. Before Lightroom 4 came out, we pre-announced that we were going to drop support for Windows XP. And we actually just recently announced that the next shipping version of Photoshop is going to drop support for Windows XP as well. And I think we'd gotten to that point where it had been enough time had passed where that was okay with our customers and kind of a good signal that we're very respectful of legacy systems.
I think XP has been out for 8 years or so.
Even longer,
even longer.
Yeah, and that's been a very popular OS, but when I went out on a press tour showing CS6 to people, and I mentioned that 12% of Photoshop users on the Windows side were still on XP, they were thankful that we were still supporting it. But like Tom said, we give them a lot of guidance that we are going to let go of that next time around.
Yeah, okay. So do we want to take a look into the products? I think this is also interesting how you are featuring hidden gems in Photoshop and Lightroom.
Your favorite features?
Your favorite features?
Lightroom, Camera Raw, and Photoshop?
So absolutely. I want to dig in a little bit on that balance of highlight and shadow detail. And then there was a little extra feature we snuck in for Lightroom 4.1 that works so well with Photoshop. It's a lot of fun to show.
Okay, great.
Good.
Shall we?
Okay. This is Lightroom 4.1 or 4.2?
This is Lightroom 4.1. 4.2 is still a release candidate available on Adobe Labs. I didn't need the new camera support, so I went ahead and decided to continue with 4.1. That's another great program where we're able to release ahead of the final release, give people advanced access to camera support and other possible bug fixes. So that's labs.adobe.com. Great resource if you're looking for camera support.
Okay.
Let's dig in for a second. We're in the develop module looking at a fairly typical image you would expect from landscape photography. It's got a really bright sky with great clouds. You've got some shadow detail in the foreground that's maybe a little bit dark. And it's a nice image. But one of the things that the new technology is really aimed at achieving is getting better balance between the highlight detail and the shadow detail. And so what I can do is with these new set of controls that are aptly named highlights and shadows, I can just go ahead and bring that highlight level down, bring the shadow detail up in the foreground. I'm going to bring the overall exposure down just a little bit. And then I'll drag up clarity a little bit to get a little bit mid-tone contrast. And you can see, just looking side by side, we've really brought that image alive with just a couple sliders. And this is something that would take techniques, quite a few steps and techniques and various applications. Result, right? You could use Photoshop and take two different layers and try to blend the different exposures. You could do a multi-image HDR exposure. But here you can clearly see all the information was in that original file, and we now have the tools to blend them. So one of the things we thought about when implementing this was, well, what about HDR imagery? What about a multi-exposure image that really captures a full 32-bit image? And we've designed the tool specifically to handle that. So here I've got a series of images. I apologize for the content. This is a canned demo image that I personally shot to really test how good this could work. And it was a series of exposures in my living room, shooting the children's toys in the corner with a really bright sunlit day outside. And I captured the range of exposures all the way through from the brightest, capturing all the shadow detail, to the darkest, capturing really all the outside detail as well. And so what I can do is I can just right-click and say, Edit in, Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. And magically, there we are. This does take a few minutes processing because these are original RAW files. And what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm in 32-bit mode. And you can see, it doesn't matter where I set this preview point, all the image information is there. Okay? And you have access to Photoshop's ghost removal technology as well. When we bring that, all I'm going to do is click OK. I'm going to save that file and close it in Photoshop. It'll pop back into Lightroom. And now what I have in Lightroom is a 32-bit TIFF file. And I can use all of the controls I'm used to in Lightroom's develop module on that image. So let's take a look at the exposure slider, because this is where you'll see the big difference. So I go all the way down. You see it goes to -10. Right? So that's a range extension of the exposure slider. Let's go all the way up. See, I've got all that detail all the way up to +10. Okay, so now I can just do something I normally I'll do. I'll bring down the highlights. I'll bring up the shadows. Really see that dollhouse. Add just a little bit of clarity, because I like it to look natural. And so you've got a high dynamic range scene processed with controls you're used to, without any of the artifacts I think a lot of us have become accustomed to with HDR imagery, these halos and kind of soft fuzziness. This is just an image that looks like, wow, you've somehow exposed perfectly for outside and inside, and you get the results that look natural right here.
So in the past, it was a little bit difficult for me to understand the HDR Pro module with gamma and so on. So this is the easy way to do tone mapping on HDR.
Yeah, very interesting.
Not only easy, but I think it's a lot more powerful. You get a much more photorealistic result, and you've got all your controls that you're used to in Lightroom or Camera Raw. because you can do the same thing in camera raw.
This is why Lightroom and Photoshop is the perfect match together for a photographer.
It's a good example of our partnership because we work on the same floor at Adobe. We realize the opportunities that can be met, partnering together.
For the long-term future, is there any chance to create these HDR images without Photoshop, directly in Lightroom? Are there any plans, anything
around that?
Not to talk about specific features in the future, but are you thinking about that?
Well, with Bryan sitting right next to me, we listen to all the customer feedback, and that actually is the first question everyone asks as soon as I show this demonstration. They say, "Well, why can't I just build that file in Lightroom?"
Right.
And there's so much technology that goes into the HDR merging. I mean, you're thinking about it; it's aligning every image to make sure that the pixels are aligned in case there's a little jitter on the tripod, or even if you're hand holding it. There's the ghost removal technology. So I never say never because I think it would be a great feature. But there is a lot of technology behind the Photoshop HDR merging.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, the ghost removal, that one little checkbox represents a whole bunch of work that was done by someone at Adobe Labs. So it was technology that we licensed from outside. We wanted the best possible feature for ghost removal. And there's a lot to the whole HDR feature. I agree that the interface here is the way to do it. I'll be the first to admit that HDR Pro, while powerful, can be a little daunting. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you don't see.
But as I mentioned, I think it's the most powerful way to do it is to use both technologies and bring it together. Okay, great. So Tom, you mentioned that we are doing in the dot releases additional camera support. There's also a reason why we can't do additional features within the point products currently on the box and licensed products.
Yes, and that's something that it's unfortunate I don't really want to bring up with customers too much because it's something that they shouldn't have to worry about. But there are some accounting rules that prevent us from adding new features to products like Lightroom or Photoshop after we sell them to the customer. So it's purely accounting based. One of the nice things about the new Creative Cloud membership offering is that because people are paying for the membership on an ongoing basis, we actually can deliver new features and value to them and avoid those accounting restrictions. So it's a nice little benefit of moving over to that subscription-based offering.
Okay, that's great. So for Photoshop,
your turn, Bryan.
Are there any plans to use this for the Creative Cloud members to have kind of new features coming for the cloud first and later into the perpetual model?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll start to see some of that in the near future. But we're very excited. It's been great to watch how Lightroom is able to add camera capability and changes, and we'll be able to not only add compatibility, like with the Retina MacBook Pros, but also some new functionality unique to Creative Cloud members.
Okay,
sounds interesting or very promising.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Photoshop then.
Great.
Retina, you mentioned it. You have a MacBook Pro with the Retina display.
I do.
Do you also have the upcoming version with the Retina support on your?
No, like Tom, I'm using what's available to everyone today. So that's what I'll be showing you. And we'll be talking about some lesser known tips and tricks with some things that are out there today, some things I want to make sure people know about.
Do you have a time frame for us?
Few minutes.
Retina display support.
Do I have a time for my Retina?
No, for the demo, for the Retina.
In a few minutes. Retina will be out immediately.
That's very good news. No.
Retina. What did we say recently? Fall. Yeah. Fall.
Okay.
I think I have this set.
Thank you. I've never actually gone native HDMI on this. How cool.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. So let's.
So Bryan, big question. What are your favorite features inside of Photoshop you'd like to show us?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me show you a couple of things first, and I'll save my favorite, which is around video, for last, which actually complements all of these. I'll mention that I'm driving all of this from Bridge, which I think a lot of people don't realize is 64-bit native in this version, in CS6. And the first thing I want to talk about is adaptive wide angle. And people have seen this on a single image, the ability to interact with the image and tell the image which area should be straight. So imagine you have a wide angle lens and you're tilting it. The software has no way of knowing the orientation of the camera. So you can click and tell lines to be straight. What a lot of folks don't realize is that you can apply this to panoramas as well. So this was a panorama that was made a while ago. and we know the physical shape of the lens. So we can just come in here and drop a few of these lines on the image. And you see I'm doing this very quickly from afar. And then the real power here is in grabbing these and rotating them down.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
Right. And so we just pull that down. And anyone who's ever shot with a panorama before knows that as you do this, your image starts to sort of do this bow tie thing.
Right.
And it can be corrected in here. So all of those images, from Lightroom that I made panos of, I can go back and correct them now in a way that I wasn't able to do before.
Big question, Brian. I see that the metadata is intact, so Photoshop in that case knows what camera, what lens was used, but does it also work when the metadata is lost or not inside of the composing?
Yeah, so you're going to get the best results if we have a profile for it, which we do here. But in the case of, say, GoPro footage, I've been shooting a lot of stills with the GoPro. It knows the basic physical shape of the lens, so you can go in and sort of fake it without. The best results will come when there's a profile. Remember, you can profile your own devices using the things that we seed on Adobe Labs. So you can create your own profiles as well. So for instance, with the GoPro, while I can kind of fake it, the best thing for me to do would be to take the time to build a profile and then load that in here. But yeah, it work with any panoramas that you have.
That's
for the profiles, there's a lens profile creator. Many of the customers are not aware of that.
Yeah, so Adobe Labs is sort of the place for a bunch of things that you're probably not aware of. It's labs.adobe.com. It's where you've seen a lot of the updates to Lightroom over the years, and it's where the current 4.2 beta is. And it's also where we put all sorts of things, the DNG profile editor, the lens correction profile creator. There's a lot of great stuff there. In fact, as of yesterday, we put up some extensions for layer blending that are up there. I barely had a chance to play with them. They came out while I was on the plane. But if you want up-to-the-minute news on Photoshop, check that out. It's for Mac only, and it just went live. Okay, so it's all about layer blending.
The other really relevant utility that's on Labs right now is the Adobe Lens Profile Downloader. So we have a creator, which you can create your own. But the first step for me would always be to go to the downloader, and it lets you query other lens profiles that customers in the community have created and shared free of charge. So my next stop after this is to go and download that and see if there's an update for the GoPro.
Cool.
All right.
Let me show you just a couple other things that a lot of people don't know about. Here we've got a still image, and I want to show you, a lot of people ask what's new in black and white. And for many versions, we haven't done anything new around black and white. But this time around, if you were to go to Gradient Map, and you were to come in here, and you want to make sure that you load your photographic toning presets, and then I like to switch this to a large list, you'll see that we've licensed a variety of really beautiful black and white gradient maps. And these being adjustment layers, you have a lot of control over exactly how they're applied and where. Increasingly, we have new users coming to Photoshop. Increasingly, we have people used to sort of an Instagram world where you just push a button and get a look. The nice thing about all of these is you just go in there and click and you get the one that you like. Especially coming from Lightroom, this is a nice way to change the look of your image, but it's still in a very friendly way. And the next one I'll show you is very similar to that as well. So it's around color lookup, which sounds very daunting, and it's a very powerful new adjustment layer, but it turns out there's some great presets in here as well. So if I come in here, I've got all of these different great looks here. There's a good film stock one. In fact, when I'm doing things with the GoPro, a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll apply a color lookup adjustment layer to the whole thing and quickly change the look of it. So the last thing I'll show you, and the feature that I'm the most excited about and the most proud of, because I fought very hard to get it in here, was a change to how we do video in Photoshop. And the first thing to mention, Photoshop has actually had support for video since CS3 extended. But video was very different back then.
Right.
And so we said, every telephone out there, every point and shoot, every DSLR is generating video content. So if we're going to change the support of video and make it easier to use, we need to do it for all versions of Photoshop. And so here's a very quick clip off of a 5D Mark II, and you see this very friendly timeline. Transitions are very, very easy. I can simply drag and drop them on here, and I can fade in and out. I can play this back. I can add audio. But what's really great is as long as I change this to a smart filter, I can do anything that I want. If I can use Photoshop, I can use Photoshop for video. So for instance, say I like that look that we saw earlier.
Right, the color grading stuff.
The thing that we were just looking at. So maybe this film stock one. What's really cool is because this is an adjustment layer, I could come in here and change my my blend modes. I could even come in and do some sort of filter. You know, I could use all sorts of different effects, even lens correction, even adaptive wide angle on video. So everything I talked about before could all be applied to video.
Yeah, especially like the thing we talked about. Let's say you have some sort of images that you already developed in some, let's say, Instagram style, and then you have also, you know, moving footage that you like to do great in the same style. Then it's the very easy way to go that way, right?
Yep.
And it's even possible to change, for example, settings during the animation period, during the video, to have it plain at the beginning and with the color look at the end. So this is pretty amazing.
So we're really excited about this. You can have multiple layers, you can have text. We did a ton of research, as I mentioned. There are so many people creating video content, but barely anyone is doing anything with it. And we find in asking people about that they're very scared by the complexity of high-end video applications. And for people who are used to those, it's great. We make some great tools for that. But for everybody else, especially for photographers coming from Lightroom, they want something that's just approachable and easy to use. And so if you can use Photoshop, you can use video in CS6.
So for Lightroom, we have a huge base and many websites and portals about developers' presets. For the color lookups, are there similar pages to get new color lookups? Because the one which are shipped with Photoshop are pretty amazing, but is there kind of exchange for color lookups, for example?
There's not any supplementary content around that yet. Like Tom said, you know, never say never. There's a vast Photoshop ecosystem, and people are always sharing content, but we haven't provided more yet.
Yeah, but I think as we mentioned in episode 3 or 2, there's After Effects, for example, where you can create color lookups and save them.
Put them back in Photoshop,
into Photoshop. Okay.
Yeah,
that's great.
But I think, like the more people start to use that kind of feature set, then it might be interesting to, again, dig into deeper and, you know, try to set up on an Adobe server, like some sort of marketplace, that you can, inside of the dialog, say, well, check if there's something new. Like, for example, lens profile, stuff like that. That customers can do their own stuff, and you can see that directly in the dialog box, something like that.
Yeah.
So currently, video and also 3D is very hot in Photoshop CS6. In the long-term future, what's the next big thing? Is it light field photography, or what's coming up at the horizon?
Yeah, not trying to force you to reveal some new features, something like that, but maybe talk about topics or trends from the market that you see and think about trying to address that in a future version, something like that.
It's interesting you mentioned light field. There's a lot of press generated with the introduction of the Hdr camera earlier this year, which is a light field consumer-based camera. And that represents what I call the overall field of computational photography. This is where you take the capture device and you partner it with software to create greater than the sum of the individual parts. And everyone talks about computational photography as the next big thing. And it's already happening. It's already been happening for many years, and we're just seeing an extension of that. You see it with the HDR photography creation. You see that with the ability to take combined images in a higher bit depth final image and the tools to be able to utilize that. So we're just seeing, I think, really an extension of computational photography becoming an everyday experience and not some distant future. And even with the Hdr on the market this year, you definitely see that.
Yeah, sounds great. So in addition, there's kind of universal format for digital negatives, which is currently not that well known, especially here in Germany. So maybe we can talk about the DNG format and also the idea behind the DNG format and why it should be more popular.
Well, and it's really, so I'm the DNG product manager. So get my soapbox out. We actually released it at Photokina in 2000 and
way back in time.
Way back 2004.
2004.
Yeah. It's now 2012, the week of Photokina. We're actually doing our 4th major update this week to the specification. So let me just give you an overview of what DNG is and why we created it. The Camera Raw team is part of the Photoshop team and the Lightroom team. is responsible for interpreting different raw file formats that come out of DSLR cameras or the Micro Four Thirds. And essentially, they're all pretty much the same. They all have the same components. Basically, a big hunk of raw sensor data. We have some metadata that describes it. And then we have a preview, a JPEG preview. And that's what you see on the back of the camera when you're looking through your images. And we found so many similarities across all of these types of formats that we said, why don't we just create a standardized one instead of having a bunch of multiple undocumented formats. It had gotten so bad, even in the early days of RAW, that every camera model, even though it might have the same file extension as other camera models, they were different file formats. It's kind of like a book publisher saying, this book we're going to publish with the table of contents in the middle of the book, and the index at the front of the book in chapter 3 as the first chapter and chapter 1 as the last chapter, and then change that for the next book they publish. It just didn't make any sense. So what we did is we standardized where everything goes in the file, and then created a conversion tool to help you migrate those proprietary formats into this standardized format. It's the same image data, it's the same metadata. You get the exact same rendition out of Adobe's raw processing tools, but you have a little bit more confidence in the future of your file formats. A lot of people say, well, there's lots of NEF files, there's lots of CR2 files, but there were also lots of WordPerfect files back in the day. I would argue a lot more than there are of NEFs or CR2s. But we knew that file format obsolescence is not exactly a phrase that rolls off the tongue and not really driving photographers to add an extra step in the workflow. So we've been adding features to the file format. Probably the biggest benefit is file space savings. So when you record an image in your camera, there's only so much compression that you can apply when you're trying to make trade-offs between burst modes and writing to the disk really fast, and you've got limited processing capabilities. So with DNG, when you transfer that proprietary file to a DNG file, we're able to apply lossless file compression to that big hunk of sensor data. So you've got zero reduction in image quality, but you've got file savings on the order of 15% for a Canon RAW file, as much as 50% for a Nikon 14-bit file. And while I know everyone says hard drive space is cheap, if I could clear off half the space for my files, I would probably do it.
Yep.
Right.
You've got metadata portability. We tuck all of those little XMP sidecars that you see with Bridge and Lightroom into the DNG file. We can update that JPEG preview, kind of like what you'd see on the back of the camera, but now in your file system, you can see a preview of your rendered settings from ACR or Lightroom. And then most recently, this is really interesting, in the latest specification 1.4 that we're releasing this week, and in Lightroom 4 and Camera Raw 7, you have this ability to include what we call fast load data within the DNG file. And this is really neat. So when you're using Adobe's raw processing products like Camera Raw or Lightroom, as you go image to image, we have to take all of that raw data off of disk, render it in real time with your settings, and present it to you. And that's that little loading bezel you see in some of our products. And if it's the first time you're seeing an image, it can take a while. Now, after you've done that once, we store the information about that file in a cache. Such a local place in your disk where if we come back to that file a couple minutes later, it loads like instantly, like you've just seen it. So what we've done is we can now take that little bit of information that we usually store in the cache, and we can put that in the DNG file. So even though it's the first time you've seen an image, it loads like you were just there.
That's great.
So that loading bezel, some of the early tests showed that it was going away 8 times faster if you had that little fast load data in there.
Yeah, when I think of my DNG images from the Leica S2, it's loading a while because it's 70 megabyte for one DNG file, and with the fast preview, I think it's much more convenient to work with.
It is, it's one of the burdens of having to shoot an S2, which is a great camera. One of the other things we did, which is I was expecting a bit more controversy, we actually added an option if you're going to export a DNG file to actually lossy compress it. So this is to make some trade-offs in quality and file size. So if you were sharing an image, let's say with a creative professional who's doing a layout, needed an FPO but wanted the raw data, you could take, let's say, a 7D Canon file, which is typically 24 megabytes when it's raw and uncompressed, and you could send them a full resolution version of that as a DNG file, but lossy compressed. and it would be only 6 megabytes. So a quarter the size, the same resolution. And so I think that gives you a lot of flexibility in your workflow, especially when you're handing around FPOs, things like that. And I've had a lot of photographers come up to me and say, side by side, they can't tell the difference.
We have done a press briefing back in May, and I had 8 journalists in Hamburg, and I was showing up a picture of a Hasselblad H4D, 40 megapixels, a DNG with the full resolution and the lossy DNG, and they can't tell me what is which photo. So this is working pretty well. Are we compressing the color space, the range from 16-bit to 8-bit, or what are we doing? Why is it so compressed and why it's working so good?
So we're doing a lot of behind-the-scenes math to prep the data in a certain way before we compress it in an 8-bit space, and then when we uncompress it, we're able to get a higher bit depth out of that image. The math is beyond my skills.
Right.
Yeah.
But it allows us to use a compression technology that can also be included in the DNG specification and openly used by other vendors and partners and get those high quality results.
For me, it's working great. For example, for behind the scenes pictures, when I'm doing a shoot, I'm serving or I'm preserving or the shooting data and the normal DNGs and the behind the scenes data and the outtakes and so on in the lossy DNG, and this is really working great for me.
Right.
Yeah. I think of the trade-offs you make with some of the cameras today. I mean, you can look at like an SRAW format on the camera where you get a quarter of the resolution and it only cuts the file size in half. To me, that's frustrating. Here we get the same resolution, but we get a quarter of the file size.
And it's still a better quality compared to JPEG.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
and it's more flexible.
So the bottom line for the customers who do not know DNG or didn't use DNG up to date, for me it sounds like some sort of the PDF of for digital images, right? I mean, you have the benefit of you can downsize the file. You can be sure that in future times you can use your archive, your images. It's a great thing.
Yeah, I even consider it's really the TIFF of images because TIFF is the
right.
standard.
TIFF might be a better comparison. You're right.
And DNG is actually an extension of the TIFF specification, so it's building on an existing standard.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. All right, so it's nothing new on the market. So we just enhanced an existing extension, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, we're building features and functionality onto the existing specification, and we've already resubmitted it back to ISO as a new standard.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think we need to write a blog article on
I think so,
on the Photoshop Direkt blog about the DNG format, because I think there's so much fire in that format. So maybe we can do that in the next few weeks. Die nächsten Wochen werdet ihr dann entsprechend auch ein bisschen was im Blog darüber lesen können, auch über die Hintergründe entsprechend zum heutigen Interview. Wir sind leider mit der Zeit ein bisschen am Ende. We're at the end of time. So, Bryan, Tom, thanks a lot for being
Very
here.
much.
It was a great
Much
pleasure
appreciated.
and great honor. You're here during the Photokina timeframe doing some partner visits. I think we will see you the next few days on the fairground. So thanks again. Maybe there's some chance to have a kind of broadcasting from the San Jose office from the 10th floor in the future to our
Maybe
show.
next time we visit you
Next
there
time.
and do a second part.
You're always welcome.
Ja, okay. So, thanks. Für uns war's das. Ich hoffe, ihr hattet Spaß bei der Show. Schickt uns bitte euer Feedback. Wie gesagt, wenn auch Fragen sind, auch zu den sprachlichen Dingen, kommt gerne auf uns zu. Und wir sagen Dankeschön und
bis zum
auf
nächsten Mal.
Wiedersehen. Bis dann. Ciao.